then we'll go from there. All right, there you go. It's official, everyone. AT Town Hall back for one visit before we'll take a couple weeks more, and then we'll jump back in towards the end of August. I'm glad everybody's here. This came out of, Karen was reminding us before we hit the record that this discussion topic came out of an AT chat. I don't remember, Karen, what the chat topic was. Did it matter, or did it just come out of discussion?
It just came out of discussion. That's all I recall.
Yeah.
And then Tiffany, we just said, who's ready? Let's work on it. Let's see what we can come up with.
Yeah, it seemed like we were having a conversation about AT consultants, whether you were a consultant that worked in a school or consultants that came into school, and how to utilize the indicators for evaluation of effectiveness to help you perform your tasks and support the educators and the learners in that school. And so we thought, well, this seemed like a fun summer topic. And if you've never been to AT Town Hall before, welcome. And if you have not, you don't know how this works potentially, this is pretty much it. There's very little plan. This is even more planned than sometimes. We actually had a topic today. This is more than normal. So this is great. I'm just curious, maybe we'll just open up conversation and start talking about it and see if that leads us down a path. Everybody who came today, you came for a reason. Hi, Alyssa. So I'm curious, what brings you to this topic? What do you hope to get from this time together today? From our 3 hours together? No, I'm kidding. That's just to see if you're paying attention for our hour together today.
Well, I can start as an AT consultant. It would be great to make some adaptations to the quiet quality indicators and see if we can use them effectively in this particular type of role. It's a different orientation. And again, Mike has them scrolling in the background. Mike, can you tell us, how are you scrolling them in the background?
I'm not really scrolling them in the background. It's like a fake scroll. It's part of my Zoom background. So I made each indicator part of the background so I can keep it in the back. So I didn't have to share my screen. I didn't want to share the screen and push everybody to a little tiny box. Plus,
so you keep going to video and you keep changing the background?
I'll keep going into the Zoom settings and go back to backgrounds and flip it to the other choices I have.
Smart
so now
idea.
It should be 2. Yeah.
Okay, great. And you shared the working document for us all?
Yeah, I shared in the chat a working document, which doesn't have anything in it yet, except the indicators. Just if you wanted to see them, I copied them off the website. And so, Karen,
it's interesting to see what draws other people to this conversation.
Yeah. Or even if you're using the indicators, how are they supporting you well? What's working for you now? We'll start with a positive. What's working for you? Oh no. You're in for a long meeting if you're just waiting for me to talk, because I'm going to fight every urge to talk.
So
Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, I will talk. So I apologize for being late. Our students start on Wednesday and it's crazy town right now.
Thanks for finding time to join us.
So of course, so I think I've got 2 different pieces of my thinking around this. Is one, definitely the role that I play in a school system. Sometimes I think doesn't 100% match up with the indicators. Like I go and do that indicator kind of run through every year and I go, well, let me see, like if it said this, then I could say this. And then the second piece of it is the work that I'm doing. I met actually this morning as a part of the Joys of Olive Fellowship, working with my mentee. We've really been trying to talk through what do the indicators look like for her position. So I feel like, again, I'm coming at it from both of those directions. And I could see a space where having something that more clearly defines and allows us to evaluate our effectiveness would be helpful. I see it as also, I would love to be able to have a document that I could give to the person who's doing my evaluation in the position that I'm in and say, like, these are the things I'm supposed to be doing for this part of my job, because right now it's very nebulous and they kind of sort of think they know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I would rather have this to guide that discussion.
Hmm.
So Alyssa, what you're talking about there is an evaluation of effectiveness as you as an AT practitioner, which is
right, of
really
you.
exciting.
Yeah. And so I think, again, I could see the dual effectiveness of having a document that looks at what is really an AT person. I don't even know what I call myself, like the AT representative person. I use AT specialist sometimes, and I don't even know that I like that nomenclature, but whatever it is in this role that I do, I see it as twofold in that it would be helping to guide and make sure I'm doing what I need to be doing so that I'm implementing things effectively, but also from a role, I think I can't be unique in the evaluator not knowing how to actually evaluate that portion of our role.
So I'm thinking back to when I was a very young person and we were just figuring out what AT was
Mhm.
and what we were supposed to be doing with it. And so we created position descriptions for ourselves and gave them to our administrators and said, here, this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
And hopefully, you know, our performance was evaluated on that and folks gave me feedback based on that. And depending on where folks work, you know, the scope of their practice varies. You know, as I think about folks who are that expert model and are serving 44 school districts and, you know, 100 buildings, their description looks really different than the classroom teacher who's implementing AT as a regular part of their job. I think, Mike, this is a really great idea to get into another AT chat at some point. Let's write a job description.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I mean, how many of us have looked at our job description and just shook our head and said, well, I don't know who that person is, because that's not me. That's not what I'm doing. And that's kind of where Alyssa's coming from also. It's
Absolutely.
interesting. And it continues to evolve into this. Alyssa, I'm going to use you as my guide right now, just because I could see you and your videos on, and it made me think of you. You're working in a school, and everything starts to become it's no longer black and white about what you do. Alyssa, I always feel like, and maybe that's a misconception of your job, it's all gray, and you're trying to navigate gray.
I think there's some gray. So the other thing that Florida did, and I'm hopelessly looking for the document right now, was that we took kind of the AT competencies and divided them into kind of IEP team member competencies and what we, I think, called our LATs, our local assistive technology specialist competencies. And I've kind of used that as a bit of a role. And again, my evaluation right now, this is a whole nother issue, but my evaluation says the speech therapist does right now. Not my job area, I don't have a speech therapy, but that's a whole nother, but eventually it will just say the occupational therapist does, because my actual job title, I'm an OT unit. So I think being able to kind of have something both to guide the practice we're doing and make sure on a monthly, whatever, quarterly basis, there's a check-in to be like, whoa, did I totally miss something that's really important here? And then the flip side to be like, okay, how can I tell somebody who doesn't really know my job, but is charged with evaluation of my effectiveness, what it is that they're supposed to be looking at?
Right.
Oh, I found it. Whew.
Yeah.
I'll put a link in the document and in the chat. Let's see.
So I love what you just did, which was make a distinction between the competencies that you developed in Florida. And by the way, I love that set of competencies because it does both the IEP team and the specialist. It's just so important to make that distinction. I think we're getting better at identifying who our audience is for some of these documents, but there's the competencies, and then for me there's a real difference between competencies and job descriptions, because in a job description, if I'm an administrator, what I'm looking at is a category and contract language, really. So in the agency where I was most recently an administrator, one of the things that we did was we had the general job description, and then there was a addendum that was called associated skills. And that's where the specifics that you're talking about went. I don't know what to do about them calling you a speech therapist, but
That's another fight for another day.
Exactly.
right, really.
The bigger
But
fish
it's
to
really,
fry.
yeah, I agree. And so to me, sometimes I get trapped in the, okay, I've got some competencies hanging out there. I've got indicators out there. And then I've got like job performance standard description hanging out there. And I feel like on a day-to-day basis, I know what my job is, but I also need those like markers, whether it's quarterly or annually, as a way to kind of be like, how could we improve the program effectiveness? Because I feel like it's sometimes lacking. Now it's hard because I have one role as an AT person.
Right.
You know, Brian's role is very different as an AT person. Mia's role is very different as an AT person. So I think trying to then think about how do we make some kind of universal document that describes the AT support person role in a way that takes in all of those perspectives.
Mhm. And you know, what you just said is exactly where we started when we began developing the indicators, but we developed because there was so much variation. We said, okay, what are the essential elements? What are the
Mhm.
main things? But we developed them at a district level. We didn't address the actions of individuals because we felt like individuals would be doing different things in different environments. So I love the idea of having quality indicators for people whose primary responsibility is assistive technology, which is what brought me here today, Mike.
No, that's great. Thank you.
And I don't want to make it like a checklist of things that you have to do in order to be effective, because I don't think that's, I don't know, super helpful. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of like, how do we ensure that whatever programmatic structure we're giving to AT in our role is taking into account all the things that we know are research-based best practice, whether it's coaching and mentoring or having administrative input, like whatever it is that those pieces that go together to do this job well. I could see, random little AT person who's just starting out in a rural district going, what do I do? And then I could see, a state level person being new in their role and going, what do I do? And
Mhm.
somehow it's got to grab from end to end for that AT role, or be open-ended enough that it can.
That's
Well, and our-
interesting. I mean, my knee-jerk reaction to that is they're two different skill sets.
Right, right.
But I don't know, and it'd be fun to investigate and find out.
Well, it's interesting. It brings up this point of that just saying you need an AT person is not enough, because the two people you just described are two dramatically different people. Yet you
Right.
could argue they are both called an AT specialist at this point, whatever. And their skill set of what your expectations are and what may be the reality are going to be different for each of those positions. And so it becomes this kind of experience of really, first of all, getting to the core of what does somebody want when they say they want an AT specialist. And just saying, I want that isn't enough, because that's not giving us sometimes enough information to even figure out who would be the most appropriate person for that position, who has the skills I need for that. Just by saying it's an AT person, you haven't really described that person at all.
Yeah, and it's also a position that needs to be valued as that position.
Right.
Because when I was first an AT person, like 1986, because I had a teaching background, I would get pulled for subbing. I got pulled for a maternity leave. And the same thing just happened to a person I was mentoring last year.
Yeah.
As teachers started to, with COVID and everything going on, the things that we had set up to do as a part of her mentoring didn't get honored by administration because her background as an educator or somebody's background as a speech therapist, you're like almost the first people pulled into sub positions.
Right.
So
It's
the
other duties
position
as
itself
assigned.
isn't always honored.
Yeah. Yeah. Your other duties. And then you're right, because that AT position in some way has been, I don't want to call it marginalized, but marginalized
Yeah.
to a point where they're like, well, this is more important for us right now as an
And
organization.
that hasn't changed in 30 years.
Right, exactly. So you didn't even have to tell us that year. You could have kept that to yourself. You could have kept it quiet and we would have never known. But yes, I agree. It hasn't changed. And yeah, what do we do? Okay. Yes, I didn't have anything dramatic to finish that statement with, but yeah, what happens now? How do we move this forward? How do we demonstrate value? We're going to feel really good about ourselves when we're done here. How do we demonstrate our value? And also, in essence, get people to ask the right questions to figure out what it is they want. Is the value we have in an organization what the organization actually wants?
Mike, I'm going to use a 4-letter word.
Do it.
I think we need more data.
Oh, I have a whole different
I
word.
do not.
I'll put it in the chat, the word I have.
I do not know if we have ever, as a entity of AT people who do this job, had anybody really do. I'm thinking about the assistive wear survey that Alyssa Zisk and some other folks just did, where they really got down to like, okay, what are your perspectives on this? What are your perspectives on that? And I feel like we don't have enough data. Like we have the data or the core that represents the people that are on the screen right now, and maybe some people who participate in AT chat who aren't here, but I don't think we have enough data. I really feel like we need a Google form out in the field or something that gives us some really good metrics of, if you are doing anything AT, how do you define your role? And what would be enough information to kind of try to picture, can we combine pieces so that, again, if we're designing something that it fits what Karen does. And I saw Heather put in the chat, she does something kind of similar to like third party, come from the outside, help support kind of role versus an in-school system versus a state person. And I would just be interested to see nationwide, what does that look like? And I know it's going to maybe look different in different places, but I don't know that we have enough data to go on in our little subset of data to really know what we need to know to make a plan about what we want.
Yeah.
Can I add on to what you just said? Is that like in my district, I'm the AT person. I'm considered the AT coordinator. Some people call me AT specialist, but if you look on the district union, like the job descriptions of everything, you won't find it anywhere. It's like I'm the hidden secret that comes out when they need something. So if you're looking at that kind of information, I think it would be interesting to see like what type of position is actually posted within the districts, if it's even acknowledged as an actual separate position.
Right. It goes back to what Gail said before, this idea of what are we calling people in bargaining agreements and this and that. Lori, what I instantly thought of, you're the Dwight Schrute, you're the assistant to the regional manager. No such animal exists, but that's that role, right? And how do we figure that out? And I know you had your hand up. Go ahead, jump in.
Okay, so this is my thought, and it might be unpopular, but I usually agree with Alyssa on everything. So I would disagree. I know, look at Mike, he's like getting ready for it.
This is what I come here for.
I know. So Alyssa, I love you. However, I am going to disagree with you. I think we have the data. I think we have the ability to predict what people need just by the definition of assistive technology itself, right? We know how it's wide and deep. I think that we really just need to ask the right questions. So it's kind of a little bit what Alyssa said, but a little bit different. So meaning like I think it would be helpful for when people need an assistive technology specialist or resource person, like Amy and I like to call ourselves in our jobs, is a form where we say something to the effect of like, what are you looking for? And then listing out the things that we do or could then connect them to the resource, right? Because here's the thing, our field cannot require us to be a bunch of unicorns that do everything because it is way too deep and wide.
Mhm.
And some of us are already, AKA Alyssa, myself, Amy, some of Kelly, Rachel, some of us already you, Mike, are already tasked with being that unicorn, right? Being that person that knows ed tech and AAC. But the reality is there's only a handful of us out there, and we cannot expect all of us to be that. It's just too much. The more and more ed tech that comes out that is considered assistive technology and accommodations, and with the AAC, with all of that being so deep and wide, we cannot expect one person to do it. So then the best that we can do, and maybe this is kind of what Alyssa was saying, is that we create a Google form for people who need the services, then to identify what they need so that we can then have the resources to then connect them with, because we can't do it all. We just can't.
And then it becomes an issue, Mia. Mia, let me tag this onto what you said. Then that becomes an issue of the people who are out there looking for a position filled. Do they want to come to somebody to have this group, just say us at this point, us say to them, you think you want that, but let me tell you what you want. And I don't know how that goes.
And I know, of course, we're like, just, we're doing the big audacious goal, right? Right
Yeah.
now we're doing the bag.
Right.
So the bag is that it would be that it's a systems approach. So something like the ATP, the people, RESNA and stuff like that, kind of start to preach like, this is not a one person deal. This is a systems approach. When you put out to hire, these are the areas in which you should think about concentrating that hire, and then creating a team, not just saying, I want one person that has the skills to fix a wheelchair and do all of those things, but then also can do AAC, and that also can do ed tech. Like it's just too much to ask one person. So yeah, maybe like it's a systems approach that needs to kind of, like Brian had put in the chat, I just saw it briefly.
Yes.
Like, right? Like maybe we should be really creating, just like in SLPs, right? SLPs have areas of, areas of specialty areas. So why would we not have the same? Doctors do the same thing, right? Like you can go to a generalist as a doctor that will in general know to help you. So like maybe we have a generalist AT position, right? But then when the general AT can't help you, you need specialists in these areas. So that kind of approach.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I was going to point to Brian's thing in the chat too, Mia. You're so right, Brian, that idea of foundational knowledge, which you could argue that's what the ATP is in its broadest sense. It's foundational knowledge. And then how do you layer in competencies that show what somebody knows beyond that becomes specialty areas, or areas of deeper knowledge, like those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I think that was the goal with that Florida document, which I did link in the chat and in there, is to kind of say, okay, what are the things that I want an IEP team member, whoever they are, including the students, to know? I want my students to know, what is AT? What can it do for me? Their definition might be different than a parent or a gen ed teacher, but I think we were trying to kind of say, okay, what are the things that our AT team whatever that composes of in your area. But I think part of it, the reason that we did these competencies and had these conversations in Florida was to educate our administrators.
Right.
And to be able to say to them, here's why we want to train your staff, because we want your staff to have AT 101. We want them to know that that Post-it note and that highlighter and that graph paper, yes, you check AT on their IEP. They are using AT. So I think to me, it's about how do we as a role, I'm going to capture AT peoples in that role. How do we help define and help our administrators to know not only our value and worth, but the kind of rationale behind why do we not just provide them sit and get trainings? Why are we wanting to do a pre-training followed by coaching and mentoring? And why is that research-based best practice? So I think, yeah, I mean, I have wondered for a while, I don't know, Brian, if you know if Fresna's ever explored sub-competencies within its work. I know there had been some conversations when Daniel was in doing the K-12 kind of survey, and I don't know if that was what was supposed to come out of it. But I agree, like, to me, I see my role as they've tried things at the school. We've educated them on what low light, no tech, mid tech is. They've tried things. Their solution isn't working. I provide solutions and then maybe I evaluate. But I can't expect anybody at my school-based team to be the jack of all trades and know all of the things about eye gaze, for example. Like that's where I feel like our role to come in and either coach and mentor them through something, or to be able to be that specified, the knowledge with a specialty. I was going to say specificity, which is a word I never can get out, but like have that specialized knowledge in specific areas. Like Mia said, I can't expect everybody to know everything about everything, and I don't want to be the everything about everything.
Yeah, and the other part is, I put it in the chat earlier, that skills inventory form that was developed in Michigan that I always push on people, because it's that idea of reminding organizations, you might have these skill sets already and you haven't tapped into them. Who do you have that works there already that might have expertise in these different areas? And by looking at the tasks you want that person to accomplish, you might be able to go to your OT and say, is this an area that you're skilled in? Or you might be able to go to a teacher or a psychologist and say, hey, is this something that is your area of focus? Do you have some knowledge you can share with our team? And I think that's really important. And a lot of times people see that form when I share it as the run away from an AT specialist form. And it's not really a run away from an AT specialist form, but instead it's a reminder that we are all AT specialists. We can all be AT specialists because it's really those little skills that we're trying to pull out to maximize the support for the students that we're working with. And so that might come from a general ed teacher who has an interest in technology. So they suddenly have this undocumented skill set that no one knows about because no one's asked them. You know, and so those kinds of things become really important. And then I would argue our role as the specialist at that point is to find those people and amplify their contribution at that point. Gail, I saw your mic come on. That's why I stopped talking.
Well, I just wanted to say that what I've been doing, I'm actually using your shared document here.
Great.
And what I've been doing is trying to make a list in the group notes part about the big categories of skill sets that we might consider ourselves needing for this kind of a role. So this is just, I'm really just writing down smart things that people have said.
Would you all like me to share that so we can all see it at the same time? Excellent. Thank you. Don't all jump in at once. I'll take your silence to mean yes, that's fine. Here you go.
Sure, Mike.
Sure. All I need is some little acknowledgement. That's okay.
There's a couple of people who noticed and have been adding and enhancing the list. And I'm not saying that this is the list because every time somebody talks, I think, well, I could talk about that too.
Yeah.
But so it is a way in my, I think I must think in lists. So it's a way in my brain to kind of narrow down this thing. I love the idea of taking a look at the resident job descriptions and making them more educationally based.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to say that the people who come to the AT Town Hall are the most skilled and the most experienced. And because I've had the chance to work with teams all over the country, one thing that I think it's important to remember is that way more than half of the people who do AT services for their district have it as a 0.2 part of their position
Correct.
in the district. And it's a different kind of thing than, you know, being able to go to an administrator and saying, here's a list of competencies.
You're right. And that 0.2, Gail, tends to be the most stress-inducing 0.2 of their entire FTE, because it was probably tacked on to their job description or their job responsibilities, with very little rationale as to why it was tagged on beyond make sure kids get the technology they need. And okay, well, what does that mean? And you're right. I look at our list that you were working on, Gail. I love the fact that AT knowledge is number 7 in that list. I know they're not in number of importance, but I like the idea that it didn't come up until number 7. But yet there's others that needs to be 1, and maybe coaching, mentoring needs to be 7 because of where they're at.
Yeah, and I don't think that. I think the people that get assigned to those 0.2 positions, like the physical therapist in one of the districts I work with most often, is the person with the most AT knowledge. But some of these other skills, other people have enhanced. And so I looked at the list before I said anything about it, and then I thought, what's missing? And it was AT knowledge, which I think is ironic.
Yeah, I think it's great that was like the afterthought, like, oh, by the way, that probably needs to be on there too.
Right.
Yeah.
The other, somebody said something about having people have particular skill sets and stuff like that. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that when Denise DeCosta and I were doing the Changing Rules of AT Teams workshops, we did them both virtually and we did them at ATIA for many years. One of the things we talked a lot about was having people ask for the support they needed. So our referral forms in that workshop were presented as requests for support.
Mhm.
And then the form itself said, what kind of help do you need?
Yeah.
And that, I don't exactly know where to put that, but I think that that's an important, we have to hand off some of the responsibilities we are taking to the people who really need to be doing the work, which is usually direct classroom staff.
Right.
So
Yeah, agreed. And again, I think that every one of us on this call will nod their heads yes to that statement. But yet, if you gathered up a room full of administrators or purse string holders, that would not be the first thing they would expect us to say. Like, no, that's why we have you. You're going to do that.
right.
And so they're still trapped in an expert first model. And they're not seeing that as more of the capacity building, like Brian pointed out, the idea of, foundational skills for all, specialty skills for others.
Right. I think the other thing I want to say, and then I'm going to be quiet because I already know what I think. But the other thing that I do want to say is that I think in our discussion, there's an assumption that people across the board are looking at capacity building, are looking at coaching and mentoring, things like that. And there are many, many AT teams in the country who are still working at a very expert model. And sometimes even the old model where you send 3 or 4 people out to see one kid, an AT. I had somebody recently ask me the question of, well, can you do an AT assessment with only one professional in the room? Or only one AT professional in the room? And so when I'm excited about this possibility of describing the real skills of AT specialists, but I think we have to acknowledge that some people will push back against this.
Well, yeah, I agree. And I think the majority of people may push back on it, because I couldn't even tell you how many times and up until recently, when I visit a school that wants to hire me as a consultant, and I start talking capacity building just in my speak, just because that's just the way I would think. And I've had directors say, no, that's what we're hiring you to do. Don't bother anybody else. Okay, well, first of all, A, it's not a bother. Two, I need everybody else in order to help. And so there's this whole idea of just a misaligned expectation of what that means to have an AT support person. I hate to even say specialist, an AT support person, or an
Can I
AT
just
team member.
Mike, can I just piggyback to what you said? Because
course.
what I was thinking that came out of the AT chat was that it was going to be more along those lines, that we were evaluating the effectiveness of our ability to facilitate and build competencies across the district, so that teams would need us less often. That
Mhm.
was one of the ways I was seeing this conversation was going to go. How do we evaluate that type of effectiveness to ensure that we are building competencies?
Yeah. And really, Karen, isn't that the first 6 things on Gail's list there that she wrote? What you're talking about is how can we as consultants or additional members of a team that come in, how can we facilitate those couple things while giving AT knowledge potentially to keep a team moving forward, or to keep a student being successful? It seems like that list is very much like that. Is that you typing, Karen? Because you're not
It's
responding.
No.
me.
Oh, I
No.
was
It's
like,
me.
ooh.
No, I had to get off the call. Get
Okay,
off
sorry.
the- so I'm just catching up.
Let's see. Brian asking great questions in the chat. I might challenge him to say it out loud, but that's okay. I'll do it. My favorite question when I do capacity building focuses on, does every IEP or IFSP team have at least one person who is knowledgeable about the probable frequently used AT tools and services that are available for the populations the teams are serving?
And Brian, what do you do when they say no?
Yeah, because they're probably going to say no 99% of the time, right?
Oh,
Well, for
no,
me, that's
it's 97% of the
Oh, I
time.
apologize.
But no, it is frequently no, but it is the vision, it is the goal that we sit there and say, if we're building capacity, we need to be able to have somebody on that team who is able to sit there and say, here's the realm of possibilities. 15% of the time, there's going to be students whose needs are so unique that we're going to have to seek out additional
Mhm.
expertise, additional assistance. But 85% of the time, most of the assistive technologies are things that are frequently used. We have enough data about what types of things help in different functional areas. So why don't we have that knowledge on every IFSP and IEP team?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And even when the answer is no, Brian, that question has served its purpose in a sense, because it's brought that to the front of their minds as an opportunity for them to be better at what they do, even without knowing anything new about AT, but instead just having a better grasp as to what they currently do to support all the students they work with. Because that's really kind of what you're asking at that point is, what are you doing now? What are things that are currently happening in every room? What are you seeing the majority of teachers use? What kinds of experiences and tools and supports are being used? And can those be used as AT? Because then you do have some AT skills because you're using those things now, those tools and strategies.
The other thing that question does is it doesn't define who has that knowledge and skills. And so that opens up the conversation. Well, we'll get the question, well, we don't have capacity to have an AT specialist on every team. Well, let's dive into that. Let's talk about that further, and let's talk about what that actually means.
Yeah, right. And a quick way that a team might view that question is the quick, dirty answer might be, well, we don't have an AT specialist, so we don't do that. And then you can go down that road of saying, well, really, do you need an AT specialist to have a deeper understanding of what it is that you're currently doing? I don't know that you do. I dare say you don't need one. Speaking as an AT specialist you just brought in, I'm going to tell you, you don't need me to do that. And so that becomes part of that conversation. It's all getting them to kind of think a little deeper about what it is that they're doing and how they're doing it. Oh, this note page is great. Sorry, I forget that I'm sharing. And so now I wanted to scroll randomly, and I apologize. I won't do that. To keep my hands off my computer. Balancing responsibilities, service delivery, training.
Who's been doing the typing?
Yeah, that's whoever's adding that. That's great. Take your props. We're giving it to you. Take it. Who are you? Was it you, Alyssa?
Wait, no, it's me.
Kelly, good job. Yeah,
Kelly.
that's awesome.
Oh,
I think that's
Kelly.
great,
It's
right? I
not
think that that's a
me.
really important. It's
Yeah.
not you?
It's Kelly, not me.
Oh, all right. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really great, Kelly. I think it's a good addition there. And again, I look at this list as an AT specialist and I say, anybody can do this. Anybody. It doesn't, you don't need.
So do we need to define what? So I go back to, I don't expect my school-based staff to know everything there is to know about advanced eye gaze AAC
Right.
or advanced whatever. So is there a subset of this that is AT specialist duties to, like I was putting in the chat, like I've tried to start telling teachers that really, like, my job role says this, but really I'm kind of your AT coach or your AT mentor. And I expect myself to know how to do programming on an eye gaze device, or how to tinker with all the settings and figure out the right ones in Snap and Read. I don't necessarily expect every one of my staff members to know that. So there is a specialist component. Like, so I feel like, yes, 1 through however many are up there. Like, I feel like there are pieces of that absolutely could be a classroom teacher who knows a lot about technology, could be doing lots of those things. Is there still a space for somebody who is the next point of contact when that person runs out of their knowledge space?
Absolutely. You know, from the beginning, what I've said is that people need to know their most frequently used technology
Mhm.
in the classroom, and then everything else, you know, it goes up the chain. So always there's a space for that, and maybe that's not reflected in this list
Mhm.
very well. I think of it in that collaboration with constituents thing, but it may mean that we need a better definition of, you know, of what teams should do when they don't have enough information.
But Joan also brings up the point of the pre-service, you know, the education programs.
Mm.
How do we partner with them to ensure that every educator gets a basic understanding of some of the readily available strategies and technologies, for example, read aloud technologies and closed captioning and things that are just readily available that will meet the needs of many of their learners, make it readily available for all. And, you know, it's part of that whole universal design thinking. And again, go ahead, sorry.
Well, we managed in Minnesota to put it into statute.
Mm.
So
And
that, can that be replicated?
I was lucky that I was collegial with the head of our teacher licensing bureau, which is an outside agency. And so when she said, "Oh, geez, they're coming and saying we need new licenses," I'm going, well, yeah, maybe I can help.
Mhm.
And so I got a seat at the table. So every time we talked about what competencies were needed, I managed to say, and then we need to talk about this. So the problem is getting that seat at the table.
Right.
I've been thinking a lot about, will we ever actually reauthorize IDEA, and how do we get better competencies for AT built into there, so that we actually have the thing I keep thinking about, and this was brought up way earlier, is how do we get data to show that we're actually doing something about this? I think, Alyssa, you're the person who brought up the D word.
No.
Do we act, if we had the requirement to say, yep, I'm sorry, Steve, hang on. Do we have the data to show that we're actually providing assistive technology to students? That would be a huge driver. That would be a huge driver, because, oh my God, we have to report it now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. And to everybody in the chat who's saying those things, to Tammy, sorry, I didn't see who said it. Tammy saying in the chat, this idea of working together to collaborate with the other professionals in our schools, our ed tech people, our coaches, and our media specialists. How do we bring them in and share with them and grow them as professionals so that they are able to be an instant, just-in-time solution maker for the students we work with, and that's really powerful. But how do you do that?
Let me just add really quickly. This is Tammy. I was able to talk to, as part of, I finished my Kelly Honor. You'll be so proud of me. I finished my dissertation fully, done. But one of the interviews that I did was with someone who is an educational coach, and he does all of those trainings. And he was talking about during that interview how awesome it was to be working with his AT professional in his area. And they were talking about how he would also use the set. He would help out with some of those IEP team meetings. So that collaboration is really helpful. And then there are other professionals in Pennsylvania, like over in the Pittsburgh area, where they were actually forced to be in the same building, and it created a partnership naturally. So I think there's definitely potential there that we need to be tapping into, because if they're teaching the masses with the technology that's expected to be used on a daily basis, how are we maximizing on that and then building on it so that we're then focusing more on those customized features that our students with unique needs need.
Right. Yeah, Tammy, so true. It's this idea of, we're constantly searching for a method to amplify ourselves, to multiply ourselves. And a way to do that in a school is to connect with those others that are tasked with technology-based experiences also, and connect with them and become part of, or kind of fuse together our services with them, and have them have a deeper understanding of what we do. And I see Lori writing in the chat that someone told her to stay in her lane, and that was not something that she should be worried about, to have this kind of collaborative. And that's unfortunate. And I'm not going to not say that hasn't happened to me. Of course it is. Of course it has. And it's depressing, because it's a missed opportunity in a school to see. And I share this story all the time with people. When an IT person told me, when I went to go explain to him how we could work together to help some of the students, and he said, I didn't get into this to work with kids. I got in this to work with computers. And I thought, well, then I said to him, man, you're in the wrong business then, because you're working with kids with computers, but you're still working with kids. Look around, they are your customers. And so it's, it's a missed opportunity, and that's unfortunate, Lori. It stinks that happened. Go ahead, Mia. Mia so politely raises her hand. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, just kidding. It's fine.
Just using a visual support, and you got to snort. Welcome. So something that we've noticed, and for me, it's been 8 years of plugging away at that collaboration at the district's level, but technology specialists are absolutely on the ground floor, somebody that we want to pair with, and if we can get to know the individual technology specialists at the school, if we you know, if we can't get the district level, you know, like going from the bottom up instead of the top down. But I did mention media specialists because our media specialists are technology specialists if we're
Mhm.
talking about school-based. And I think sometimes they're oftentimes forgotten, but they are absolute shoo-ins for Learning Ally and Bookshare and technologies like that. And even just, you know, I mean, just think about it. Reading is the gateway to everything. So if you can get your media specialists on board, I really think that we need to be talking about that more and really encouraging that. Luckily, I happen to be friends with someone that was a media specialist and a technology specialist that now is running media specialists for our main district here. And so I got us an invite to the media specialist / technology specialist extravaganza because they are now collaborating because it makes sense,
Right.
right? And Amy and I were able to go to that one dayer and just kind of like connect with a bunch of all of them there. And it was truly like the most amazing experience. But I will tell you that the AT specialist for that specific district were not there because either their bosses blocked the invite because it's one of those things where it's like the admins are only allowed to talk to each other. Not like, so they couldn't have done what I did
Right.
as a, you know, as a consultant. They couldn't have done what I did and say, hey, like, just directly direct message my friend Allison and be like, hey, can we get an invite? And she sends us an invite. Right. So it was sad to me that we were there because we support the district and 6 other districts, but their own AT specialists were not there.
Mhm.
So that's just
And then so Mia, I'll put you on the spot then. How do you swing that around to then be the facilitator of that, to get those district people into that circle?
So what I did, well, we are also that is a very touchy subject specifically with our specific district, because when I first came on as a Fiddlers, and my AT specialist was actually my mentor when I first came back to teaching in Orange County, and she was new second year in her job as an AT specialist. When I started to collaborate and make those connections, I always say, you always contact your AT specialist first, and then I am a support. That is in emails, that isn't everything I say. However, because certain admin like to hear what they want to hear, they actually literally circumvented everything I said and everything I put in emails, talked to each other. And the next thing I know, my friend who was the AT specialist is calling me up going, what did you do?
Yeah.
They're saying that they're going to give Fiddlers this presentation and that I don't need to do this anymore. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
So what I do is like, I always CC everybody on my emails, even though I'm CCing them anyway. And I always say, this is your first line of attack. Always contact this person first. I am then a support to that person. And then finally, what I told Allison, who was in charge of all the media specialists in the tech extravaganza, was I did mention to her, I was like, I noticed that the AT specialists weren't here. Maybe next year it would be great to reach out to their admin and ask if they could come.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be very beneficial. Whether they decide to come or not is up to them, but I think that might be a very beneficial thing. So that's kind of how I work that.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy to do that for sure. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Mia. That was great. All right, so we have 3 minutes for the top of the hour. I want to respect your time and I would not want to be responsible for you missing the start of another meeting. It would just pain me right here in my heart. It'd be upsetting. So Karen asked in the chat, what do we do next? I would love to continue this conversation. It's clearly a conversation we continue. And I wonder if we take a few weeks to kind of digest this document and think about it, and then maybe even start to attack parts of this list that we came up with in subsequent town halls. Thoughts? I hate to be the dictator of what we do. I really don't like that at all. So I'm curious. Karen, what do you think? You're about to say something.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Mike, because this is a great conversation that has gone in a variety of different directions. And so maybe we can identify which part of it do we really want to focus in on and focus in on that for the next, and then we can, just delineate certain parts and then dig deeper and maybe make some next steps. Like some will be to do what Joan did. Was it Joan who
Mhm.
worked at the Minnesota level? I mean, I just reached out to find out who the DOE rep is here in Massachusetts because it has changed. Because I want to have an impact at the state level, and it sounds like that's one of the ways that we really can make a difference.
Yeah, I think so too. And I envision kind of as we go forward, maybe looking at creating an opportunity in these town halls to structure part of the time, but then leave part of the time open for just general conversation. And so maybe each one of these areas that we have in this list becomes a talking point for part of a town hall to dig a little deeper. And then we go off and do, because I do like that, I do value that whole idea of our just-in-time collaboration and brainstorming on things that people are dealing with in those weeks. So maybe we find a little happy balance there, happy medium. And I will task myself with doing that, trying to figure that out as we move forward. So let me stop sharing for a second. Let me make sure you all have the document in the chat one more time, just so that you can get in there and check it out. The document is open. Feel free to edit. Don't erase the document. You all have, be responsible with your editing privileges. And as we wrap up, it is right at the hour. Everyone, it was so nice seeing you. And I look forward to continuing. Maybe we'll start in a couple of weeks. I'll look at the calendar and get kind of a sense of when we'll start. That way people have a chance to settle into the new year, then we'll get going. All right. Very good. Everyone, a
Thanks,
pleasure as
Mike.
always.
Thanks, everybody. This was
Thanks,
great.
everybody. Have a great day.